So hi everyone, my name is Blair. I'm a dietitian at St. Joseph's Healthcare Hamilton, and I'm here to talk to you about eating well with scleroderma. So I've got a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to do my best to get through it, but I do want to mention before getting into it, I do have some handouts that I'm going to show you how to get access to at the end. So I'll have a slide at the end with a link to a number of handouts that you can access from home. I do have some print copies as well. So what I want to cover today is preventing malnutrition, reducing inflammation, improving energy levels, and improving gastrointestinal symptoms. So what are the main causes of malnutrition and scleroderma? Well, there's a number of issues, but one of the first ones is oral changes, so issues with swallowing, difficulty chewing, dry mouth, as well as narrowed mouth opening, which can make eating difficult. The next one, hand disease, so Raynaud's disease can make preparation of foods more difficult as well as feeding. Food avoidances, so trying out the trendiest new kind of fad diet in an attempt to improve symptoms. And then moving on to gastrointestinal symptoms. So this is a big one, like you mentioned, reflux, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, as well as gastroparesis. So we've talked about the problems, so what are the solutions? So for chewing and swallowing difficulty, first off, if you have any issues with this, especially if you have coughing a lot with meals, seeking out a speech-language pathologist because there's the swallow experts, and they can help you identify which foods are safest for you to eat, and you can access a speech-language pathologist through the Community Care Access Center. So if you're involved with CCAC, you can also talk to your family doctor about getting an outpatient referral. So with swallowing, some of the most difficult foods to swallow are meats and breads. So with meats, modifying the texture can be a good way to get them down. So cutting them up into smaller pieces, kind of a minced meat type texture, adding extra sauces, extra gravy, those can all be helpful in making them easier to swallow. With breads or other dry foods like crackers, it's really just the dryness that makes them difficult to swallow. So if you're able to make it more moist, have something like a muffin or pancakes that are going to have a little bit more moisture to it, that may be easier to get down, but otherwise just avoiding dry foods in general is your best option. So with hand disease, so what to do if you're having problems preparing food, well, trying to have easy foods ready for you, so having some cut up fruit or veggies in the fridge, having yogurt or a nutrition shake or smoothie that's ready to go for you. If you have family that can help prepare meals and have some individually prepped meals in the fridge or the freezer for you, that's a good option, or having meal delivery services, and I'll have some links to those at the end as well. So, of course, weight loss is a big issue as well as food avoidance. So with weight loss, this is a topic that I could probably spend an hour talking to you about, how to prevent weight loss, how to gain weight. But like we said, small, frequent meals, trying to get all the calories and protein in. And that doesn't mean, planning out 6 different meals in a day, but just having your breakfast, lunch, and dinner in a smaller portion, and including snacks in between that include a good source of protein. So I also have an excellent handout link to this on that will go through basically everything I would if I had a little bit more time. And then with food avoidance. So if you do a quick Google search of nutrition and scleroderma or diet and scleroderma, you're likely to find some useful information, but you're also likely to find a lot of blogs that recommend avoiding big groups of food, like avoiding meats or avoiding dairy, that type of thing. And that specific diet may have worked for that specific blogger, but it's a very individual disease. So I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end about food elimination diets and how to determine if a food is causing an issue for you. So with early satiety and slowed stomach emptying, so again, small frequent meals. If you do have diagnosed gastroparesis, which is slowed stomach emptying, avoiding slow to digest foods like high fiber foods. Again, we only really want you to follow a low fiber diet if you have that diagnosis, but because high fiber foods and high fat foods take longer to digest, avoiding those foods can be helpful. So, reducing inflammation. So, scleroderma is autoimmune disease that's characterized by an overproduction of collagen. So, I want to address a certain misconception out there. So, there isn't actually any specific food that can increase or decrease production of scleroderma. So, avoiding foods that are high in collagen actually won't decrease your collagen production. So what we can do is have a diet that's high in antioxidants as well as anti-inflammatory foods. So the Mediterranean diet is kind of a staple diet for that. It's been well studied for heart health and as well as easing low-grade chronic inflammation. So it's a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables, high in fiber, beans, whole grains, as well as lean proteins such as fish, chicken, turkey, limited red meats, and of course high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are healthy fats, which can be found in fish, walnuts, chia seed, flaxseed, all that good stuff. So just as we want to increase our intake of anti-inflammatory foods, we also want to try to limit our intake of pro-inflammatory foods. And I should mention, if you're trying to gain weight, you are probably going to have some intake of these foods. But overall, again, pro-inflammatory foods, we're looking at refined starches, so white breads, foods with a lot of added sugar like pop, as well as trans and saturated fats. So you may have heard the term trans fats before, and there is a natural type of trans fats that you'll often see in dairy products, and those are actually okay to have, but avoiding man-made trans fats. So that's when you take a liquid oil and change it to a solid fat. So you'll find that a lot in cookies and crackers and things that have a really long shelf life because they extend shelf life and they also improve taste. So our government's been trying to ban trans fats, but they're still in there in a lot of those really processed products. And then saturated fat. So you're going to find that in mostly processed meats, sausage, bacon, as well as fried foods. So what can you do to improve energy levels? Well, staying hydrated is a big one, as well as limiting the pro-inflammatory foods like I mentioned, eating small, more frequent meals, making sure you're getting all the calories and protein that you need in a day. And because your diet may be limited by swallowing difficulty or your symptoms, you may not be able to eat a fully well-balanced diet. In that case, you may be deficient in iron, B12, vitamin D, so it's worth going to your family doctor to have those checked. As well as planning ahead, so if you're able to, preparing meals to put into the freezer, preparing individual meals, as well as using meal delivery services if you don't have that option. And then, of course, controlling your gastrointestinal symptoms, which I'm going to get into now. So we want to identify problem foods. So we know that abdominal cramps, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, as well as reflux can all be linked to diet. Well, the good news is we already know some potentially problematic foods. So foods that are very spicy, hot sauce, curry, salsas, can all be linked to reflux. So I do have a handout at the end that goes through all the foods, because again, this is just a quick blurb about them. So if you do have issues with reflux, looking at that list of foods and remembering that it's not that I want you to avoid all those foods for starting now until forever. I want you to look at them and try to record a food symptom journal if you can to determine which foods actually bother you. So moving on, gassy foods, broccoli, cauliflower, beans, eggs, that can cause increased bloating. And then high-fat foods like deep-fried foods, heavy desserts, again, takes longer to digest. It's going to stay in the stomach longer and can cause issues with bloating or reflux. So that brings me to the low FODMAP diet. So you may have heard of this before, maybe this is your first time hearing it, but this is a diet that's been well studied in patients with irritable bowel syndrome. So the symptoms that people with irritable bowel syndrome commonly have are constipation, diarrhea, bloating, cramping, and this diet has actually been shown to be quite helpful in that population, improving symptoms in about up to 75% of patients who adhere to it. So there's 4 different categories here. So you have the first one, sounds a bit kind of like Star Trek or something. It's fructans and galactans. And again, this list of foods is just kind of skimming the surface. I have a handout at the end again. So fructans and galactans are found in wheat, bran, beans, onions. Lactose is a natural sugar found in milk and milk products. And fructose, fructose is a sugar found in a lot of, or most fruits, but when it's in higher levels in the fruit compared to glucose, that's when it can cause some of the issues. And then we have polyols, which are found in stone fruits, as well as sugar alcohols. So foods that are sweetened may have some sugar alcohols in them. So what do we do with this information? Well, if you're looking at trying the low FODMAP diet, and I suggest this if you find that your symptoms are really impacting your quality of life, because it can be a very restrictive diet, and it's definitely something that takes a lot of planning, because if I tell you all of a sudden you have to go on a 2 to 6 week food restriction, which is the first step. So you actually restrict all foods high in FODMAPs. So that means you're eliminating wheat, you're eliminating dairy, and I don't know about you, but I would have a hard time deciding what to have for dinner that night. So it's helpful if you have some support, if you have access to a dietitian to make use of that. So they suggest following it for 2 to 6 weeks. A lot of people will see symptom relief in 2 weeks, but if you don't see symptom relief in 2 weeks, following it all the way to 6 weeks to see if it may work for you. So if you have symptom relief during phase 1 of following a low FODMAP diet, that's where we go to stage 2. So picking one of the categories of foods that I just talked about and doing a 3-day diet challenge. So picking one food from that food group and trying it for 3 days. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the next slide and I'll go back. But there's a lot of information on this slide, but as you can see, you have your category for lactose is what they're starting with here. So they're choosing yogurt to start with. So on day 1, having just a small yogurt at breakfast, monitoring your symptoms. So your symptoms on this food symptom journal are kind of the most important part. So making sure to monitor those. So no symptoms on the first day. Day 2, try a little bit more. So have a small yogurt at breakfast and lunch. There was slight distension after an hour. Not quite sure if it was related to the yogurt. So try it again the next day. Again, increase the portion size. A good portion of yogurt at breakfast and lunch. And no symptoms. So that's promising that it's probably a food that doesn't bother you and you can bring it back into your diet. And again, this is just showing 2 of the categories, but the next one is fructose. So bringing in a high fructose food like sugar snap peas. So this one, day 1, within 30 minutes, you're getting a lot of gas, bloating. So it's not a great sign. You're going to try a different food from the fructose category. So trying some mango. Again, same things happen. After 30 minutes, bloating, gas. A lot of issues there, so that's giving you a good idea that foods high in fructose may be an issue for you. So a lot of the foods are related in that category, so if one food bothers you, it is likely that some of the other foods will bother you, but it's definitely worth trying them one step at a time. So phase 3, bringing back all the successfully reintroduced foods and maintaining your diet with those foods in there. So to summarize, if you're able to tolerate it, eating a diet high in fruits and vegetables, high in whole grains, omega-3 fatty acids, as well as small frequent meals, staying hydrated, and only avoiding foods if you've been able to determine that they specifically cause you digestive distress, and if possible, finding a dietitian to work with. So I'm just going to quickly show my references, and then I'm just going to leave these last 2 slides up in case you want to copy anything down. So if you haven't seen a dietitian before, ask your family doctor first. A lot are associated with family health teams now, so they have a dietitian that they can refer you to. As well as, again, if you're involved with home care, community care access center, you can have a dietitian come to your home through that service. And then these are just some local dietitians. So Nicole Pinn is a private practice dietitian in Burlington, so you have her phone number and contact information. And then Stephanie Claremont is actually a dietitian who has IBS, who has a lot of experience with the low FODMAP diet. And she does all online counseling, so kind of handy. You can do it from the comfort of your home, and that's her website there. And then, as I mentioned, I do have some handouts. So all these handouts can be accessed at home. So if you just bring up your Google search bar, type in Hamilton Health Sciences and the name of the handout. So if I say Hamilton Health Sciences, how to increase your intake of protein and calories, the handout's likely the first thing that you're going to see there. So you can see that the low fermentable carbohydrate, that's the FODMAP or low FODMAP diet, and St. Joe's has some as well. So if you go to, or just Google St. Joseph's Patient Education, all the handouts are listed in alphabetical order on that one. So if you just go to G, you'll find gastroesophageal reflux disease. And then, as I mentioned as well, home meal services, so Heart to Home meals. They prepare kind of healthy meals, individual serving sizes, and you can order as many or as little as you like to keep in the freezer for when you need it, as well as Meals on Wheels is an option for hot meal services. So that's my presentation for you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I guess we'll move on.